Look at the skyscraper. It's almost a kilometer tall, 632 meters, the second tallest building in the world at the time of its construction. But look closely at its shape. It doesn't stand upright like a typical tower, it's twisted. The entire building is spiraled, as if a giant invisible hand grabbed the skyscraper by the top and twisted it a third of a turn while the concrete was still soft. It looks like an architect's whim, a beautiful oddity. But here's the whole point. This twist isn't just for show. It's cold-blooded engineering calculation that saved the project from typhoons and saved tens of millions of dollars. The building was twisted to trick the wind, and it was built on soft river mud where skyscrapers shouldn't be built at all. This is the Shanghai Tower. That's how it works. Now look, why even bother to twist the skyscraper?
Twisting a 632-meter skyscraper by 120 degrees wasn't an architectural whim. It was a cold, calculated trick to outsmart deadly typhoons.
Shanghai, Pudong District. Just 30 years ago, this was just fields and warehouses. But today it's a glittering forest of skyscrapers, the financial heart of China. And the authorities wanted to crown it with the country's tallest building, a symbol of China's leap into the future. The goal: to build a super tall tower over 600 meters high right in the center of Shanghai. But this location had two problems that would be fatal for a skyscraper, both related to the elements. The first problem is the wind. The taller the building, the more the wind sways it. And Shanghai is located on the coast, where typhoons rage every year, monstrous storms with winds of over 200 kilometers per hour. At an altitude of 600 meters, such a wind hits the building with colossal force, trying to shake it. The second problem is beneath the ground. Shanghai is located in the Yangtze River Delta, and the soil here is soft, wet clay, and silt. There is no solid rock close to the surface. Placing a kilometer-high tower weighing hundreds of thousands of tons on wet clay is like building a skyscraper on pudding. These two enemies, the wind from above and the mud from below, were what had to be overcome. And now, the numbers themselves. The Shanghai Tower is 632 meters tall, with 128 floors. Its silhouette spirals 120 degrees from base to peak. That is, the top is rotated a third of a full rotation relative to the foundation. Inside are ultra-fast elevators that accelerate to 18 meters per second, some of the fastest in the world. And at the top hangs a 1,000-ton anti-roll bar. The tower was built from 2008 to 2015. On paper, it's madness. All that remained was to build it, and it doesn't stand alone. The Shanghai Tower rose alongside two other giant skyscrapers that had been built earlier. Together they form the famous trio of Pudong high-rises, 3 generations of Shanghai's record breakers, standing shoulder to shoulder. The new tower became the tallest of them, crowning the entire ensemble. And for a district that simply didn't exist 30 years ago, in its place there were fields and warehouses, the rise of 3 such magnificent skyscrapers in a row in just a couple of decades seems almost incredible. It was as if Shanghai was deliberately showing the world how quickly it had taken off.
By disrupting violent wind vortices, this precise spiral shape reduced wind loads by 25%, saving nearly $60 million in structural steel.
Let's start with the main character, that twist. How can a building's shape protect it from the wind? And here lies the genius of physics. When wind flows around an ordinary, straight, and perfectly aligned skyscraper, something insidious happens. Behind the building, the flow breaks away and swirls into vortices, which break away first from one side, then from the other. And these vortices rock the tower from side to side, rhythmically, jolt after jolt. This phenomenon is called vortex shedding, and it is precisely this, not just the force of the wind, that is the main enemy of tall buildings. A straight tower is like a sail to such a wind. And here's the solution the engineers found. By twisting and slightly narrowing the building's height, the wind has nothing to cling to. Flowing around the twisted spiral surface, the flow can't coalesce into a single, powerful vortex and break away all at once. It slides off the tower in a jagged, disjointed fashion at different heights. the swaying force dissipates. Simply put, the twisted building confuses the wind. It can no longer strike it in a uniform rhythm. But the most astonishing thing is how precisely they calculated this. The engineers tested dozens of models in a wind tunnel with varying twist angles, from 90 degrees to 210, and they found the ideal, a turn of exactly 120 degrees. At this angle, the wind load on the building dropped by approximately a quarter. And here's what's so beautiful. The engineering calculations here coincided with the cultural meaning. The tower's spiral shape alludes to images dear to Chinese culture: an unfurled scroll and a dragon spiraling into the sky, a symbol of strength and good fortune. In other words, the architects weren't simply looking for aerodynamics, but a form that would be both technically perfect and speak to the language of Chinese symbols. A rare coincidence ensued. The very thing that best withstands typhoons also happens to be a beautiful national symbol: a dragon rising into the sky and a precision aerodynamic profile in a single silhouette. Now think about what a quarter less load means. It's not just a number. Since the wind pressure is weaker, the building doesn't need such a massive frame to resist it. And the twisted tower saved about 25% of the frame's steel. That's roughly $58 million saved. That's the beauty of the idea. The twist not only protects against the wind, but also makes the building cheaper. A shape that seems like an expensive whim of the designer actually paid for itself and saved a fortune. Beauty and calculation merged into one.
Because every single floor in this twisted tower is unique, engineers had to build the entire skyscraper inside a computer down to the last bolt before pouring a single drop of concrete.
But this raises the question, how do you physically construct a twisted building? It's far more complicated than simply stacking identical floors. In a typical skyscraper, a single standard floor is simply copied upward 100 times, easy and predictable. But in a twisted tower, almost every floor is slightly rotated relative to the one below. The outer wall is never strictly vertical, and the shape constantly changes height. This means that the elements of the outer frame and facade are slightly different at each level. Such a construction is impossible to visualize. The entire building was first assembled in a 3D computer model, calculating the position of every beam and glass panel. Essentially, the skyscraper was first built in a computer, down to the last bolt, and only then in concrete and steel. Without modern digital design, such a twisted form simply could not have been calculated or assembled. But shape alone isn't enough. Even a twisted tower of such height is still slightly swayed by the wind. To prevent people on the upper floors from feeling this, a vibration damper, a huge weight weighing around 1,000 tons, was suspended at the top of the building. It works like a pendulum. When the tower tilts one way, the weight's momentum shifts the other, dampening the sway. People at the top barely feel the vibration, and the only clue that the building is moving at all is the damper itself. From the observation deck, you can see this colossus gently swaying back and forth. Incidentally, it was deliberately made beautiful and open to tourists, an engineering detail turned into an attraction. And speaking of the summit, how do you even get someone up over 100 floors in a reasonable amount of time? To achieve this, the tower was equipped with some of the fastest elevators in the world. They accelerate to approximately 18 meters per second. That's over 60 kilometers per hour, vertically upward. Such an elevator can reach the observation deck from the lower floors in less than a minute. At such a speed, the same problem arises as in an airplane. The pressure drops sharply, causing passengers' ears to pop. That's why the cabins were sealed, with a smooth pressure equalization system to ensure a smooth ascent. You enter the elevator at the bottom, a gentle push, and voila, you're practically in the clouds. And the Shanghai Tower's observation deck, at over 500 meters, was once the highest in the world, higher than the Burj Khalifa's observation deck.
To anchor a massive megatall skyscraper into soft river mud, workers conducted a continuous, non-stop 63-hour concrete pour to create a giant solid base foundation.
Now comes the second problem: soft soil. How can a kilometer-long tower be placed on river clay without sinking or collapsing? There's no rock near Shanghai, so there's nothing to support it against. The solution? Piles. A forest of piles was driven into the soft soil, extending tens of meters down to denser layers. They support the building not by pushing against the solid bottom, but largely by friction with the soil along their entire length. And on top of this forest of piles, a gigantic concrete foundation slab, 6 meters thick, was poured. A solid concrete pad that distributes the tower's enormous weight evenly across all the piles. And it was this slab that was responsible for one of the most impressive moments of the construction. Such a huge slab couldn't be poured in sections. The joints would be weak points, weak. Therefore, it had to be poured in one continuous pour. And they did it. In a single pour, approximately 63 hours non-stop, they pumped over 60,000 cubic meters of concrete into the foundation. For almost 3 days, the concrete flowed like a river, around the clock, without a single pause, until a solid, monolithic foundation formed beneath the entire skyscraper. Only on this foundation could the kilometer-high tower be safely erected. What holds the tower itself aloft? All 128 stories high. Hidden within is a two-part skeleton. At the very center is a powerful reinforced concrete core, a sturdy square rod containing elevators and stairs. And at the edges of the building are steel columns, mega supports. And here's the key. At several levels, the core and outer columns are connected by giant steel trusses called outriggers. Think of them as rigid arms that support the central rod against the outer columns. Without them, the slender, tall tower would bend in the wind like a fishing rod. But these arms transform the core and columns into a single, rigid system that resists swaying. A soft, fluid form on the outside, and a very rigid, well-thought-out skeleton within. And now comes the most beautiful and clever part of the building, which not everyone notices. Look closely and you'll see. The tower appears to have two walls, an outer glass shell and an inner one, and between them is an airspace. This is called a double facade, and it's a brilliant design. The inner wall is essentially a regular cylindrical building, and on the outside, a second transparent glass skin is wrapped entirely in a spiral. Between these two layers, a gap remains, an air gap. And here's the trick. This air gap acts like a thermos. In winter, it traps heat inside and insulates against the heat outside in summer. The building requires significantly less energy for heating and air conditioning. A huge savings. But that's not all. Because the outer skin is spirally twisted and the inner skin is a straight cylinder, the gaps between them aren't just gaps, but 9 tall, open atrium spaces that extend up the entire tower. They've been transformed into hanging gardens, green areas with trees and cafes right inside the skyscraper at a tremendous height. Essentially, the engineers have hidden 9 greenhouses between the two walls of the building. The skyscraper isn't just a tower, it's a vertical city with parks inside. This transparent outer skin also serves another important purpose, as a shield from the elements. The actual windows of the apartments and offices are located on the inner wall, while the outer glass layer absorbs all the fury of the typhoon, rain, and squalls. People inside can sit peacefully in the green atrium garden, sipping coffee at an altitude of 500 meters. While the storm rages outside, they are separated from the elements by an additional glass wall. Imagine, the wind roars and the rain lashes outside, and you stand in a warm winter garden among the trees, right under the clouds, and you feel at peace. This double skin makes life at such an altitude not only energy efficient, but also comfortable. It's as if the skyscraper has donned a transparent cloak protecting itself from the elements. Now, let's be honest. What's the point of all this? The Shanghai Tower wasn't conceived as just a simple office tower, but as a vertical city. Its entire height was divided into 9 zones, stacked one on top of the other like distinct neighborhoods. Each zone contains its own offices, shops, and cafes. And at the base of each is that very same communal atrium garden, where people from each zone meet, relax, and socialize. The idea is that people shouldn't feel trapped in a soulless high-rise, but rather live as if in a multi-story city, where each level has its own green plaza. This is a new take on what a skyscraper can be. The tower wasn't just smart, it was also surprisingly green. It's largely self-sufficient. Hundreds of small wind turbines were installed at its very top, on the crown. The logic is ironclad. At an altitude of 600 meters, the wind is almost always blowing, so it would be a shame not to utilize the very enemy the building combats with its form. These turbines generate electricity for lighting in common areas. The tower converts the wind blowing through it into its own electricity. The building also collects rainwater and reuses it, while its double facade thermos saves a significant amount of energy on the climate. As a result, one of the tallest skyscrapers on the planet received top marks for its environmental performance. A building that defies the elements has also managed to make the elements work for itself. That's the whole point. China wanted to build a super tall tower where everything was stacked against it. Fierce typhoons above and soft river clay below. Soft. And the engineers didn't try to conquer the elements with brute force, simply by making the walls thicker. They got smarter. They twisted the building 120 degrees to confuse the wind, and in doing so, saved a fortune on steel. They drove a forest of piles and poured a monolithic foundation in 3 days to keep the tower on the mud. And they wrapped the skyscraper in a second glass skin, hiding 9 gardens between the walls. They didn't fight the wind, they outsmarted it with the building's very shape. Form against the elements, calculation against the typhoon. And you know what's most interesting about this? This twisted tower has become a model for the entire world. Engineers have proven that a building's shape isn't just aesthetics, but a powerful tool for combating the elements. The right curve saves steel, dampens wind, and makes a skyscraper both cheaper and safer. Now, super tall buildings are increasingly being designed twisted, tapered, and streamlined. Not for looks, but for physics. The Shanghai Tower showed that to conquer the wind, you don't have to fight it. You just need to build a shape that it will crash against. But twisting a skyscraper into the wind is one thing. But what if you need to build it where there's no land at all? An entire airport on a sinking island? Or hold up a tower with a golden sphere against an earthquake? That's for next time. If you're interested in how humans outsmart the elements time and time again, subscribe. We only discuss stories like that here. See you at the next impossible structure.